Hey, high school literacy leaders, welcome back to Curriculum Chats. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and in this video, I'll be discussing the first two lessons in the first section of the Warmth of Other Suns unit. So we'll begin with lesson 1. In this lesson, students will establish a purpose for reading The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. They'll generate questions about Wilkerson's book before reading to deepen understanding and gain information. They'll also interact with sources in meaningful ways, such as note taking and annotating, focusing on pages Roman numeral 7 to page 7 of the book. There is one text for this lesson, which is The Warmth of Other Suns. Quite a few materials. The Warmth of Other Suns Culminating Task Checklist, Attending to Details Tool, The Warmth of Other Suns Unit Text List, Vocabulary and Context Tool, Vocabulary Journal, Assessing Sources Reference Guide, and Tone Reference Guide. For the lesson overview, students will begin their study by reading the beginning of The Warmth of Other Suns to set the context and focus for the unit. These first pages of the unit introduce them to 3 African American migrants on whom Wilkerson focuses, and they will explore the similarities and differences among the details in their stories and how those details interact to convey the impact of migration on individuals and families. Now we'll dive into the 6 activities in this lesson. To kick off this unit, students are essentially previewing the text independently. The teacher allows them about 5 minutes to examine The Warmth of Other Suns and skim through its pages. When time is up, they create a 2-column table in their learning log, labeling one side Notice and the other Wonder. They write details that capture their attention on the Notice side. They will also use this side to respond to questions about text. On the Wonder side, they write questions they have about the text. After working on their charts, they get into pairs and discuss with a partner their Notice and Wonder table and their ideas about what they think they'll be doing in this unit. To wrap up Activity 1, the whole class comes together for students to share out their responses. To support students, there is some information in the teaching notes that the teacher may want to share with the class. It also states that English learners may be unfamiliar with skimming text and suggests reminding them that they still read left to right, but can look all around the novel's cover and back pages. The teacher might want to do this as the students do it or before they do it, so they know what skimming text looks like. This table would make a great anchor chart, so as students share their observations and questions, the teacher could have them add those to a class chart, which can be retained to review as more information is presented to students and new questions arise during the reading of the text in this unit. They will use their Notice and Wonder tables to track their observations and questions as they move through each section of the unit. Further suggestions are a warning against front-loading background and contextual information about the Great Migration before students begin reading the book, as the goal is for them to build their understanding in an authentic way as they read the text. In the next activity, students begin their vocabulary journals for this unit. They've been using this graphic organizer as well as the vocabulary and context tool since the beginning of the school year, so I won't waste too much time talking about it. For this activity specifically, they're adding the word epigraph to their vocab journals before either the teacher or a peer reads aloud The Warmth of Other Suns opening epigraphs by Richard Wright, Mahalia Jackson, David Kahn, and W.H. Stilwell. They individually make additional notes on their Notice and Wonder tables, and at the end of the reading, the class discusses the questions on the screen. Students will explore these epigraphs and others and more in upcoming lessons. To support students, the teaching notes recommend that during the read aloud, students listen to an expert reader, either the teacher or an audio recording. If students would benefit from additional reading comprehension support, the teacher might pre-plan various stopping points, for example, to pronounce difficult words or prompt students to annotate the text for key details. Remind students that epigraphs are read in the same way as any other page of English text, from left to right and top to bottom. In Activity 3, either the teacher or a student reads aloud Leaving from the Warmth of Other Suns. As students listen, they take notes in their learning logs in response to the questions on the screen. Based on the reading abilities of their students, teachers may consider students read these 7 pages on their own or with a partner to work on developing their skills at untangling complex texts. Keeping in mind that we don't want to front load too much information about the Great Migration, the teacher might also consider facilitating some activities that activate students' prior knowledge based on their own backgrounds or experiences, as it will be important for students, especially English learners, to understand the meaning of migration as they analyze this text. I thought about discussing how and why birds migrate or showing some images of people migrating to kick off a discussion. Next, students work in small groups using the Attending to Details tool to analyze relationships among the details in all 3 parts of Leaving from the Warmth of Other Sun. That's pages 1 through 7. And respond to the questions on the screen, followed by a whole class discussion of the questions. To support students, the teacher might spend some time discussing the purpose and organization of the tool, as well as modeling for students how to use it to move from key details to a text based observation that expresses their developing understanding of the text using the first question. Students might then practice their skill in performing this process on questions 2 and 3 to a gradual release. Activity 5, as usual, should be pretty quick. Students are just reviewing the unit text list and independent reading options. I always suggest getting together with the ILS and creating a display of the independent reading options if possible. To wrap up Lesson 1, students read The Great Migration, 1915 to 1970, from Part 1 of The Warmth of Other Suns, and that's pages 8 through 15. They respond to the questions on the screen in their learning logs and write new or interesting words they encounter in their vocabulary journals. To support students, they're likely going to be doing this in class, so teachers might give them a choice of reading either independently or with a partner. On to Lesson 2. So, in this lesson, students are establishing a purpose for reading The Warmth of Other Suns, evaluating Wilkerson's use of text structure to achieve her purpose in part 1 of the book, as well as how her use of language informs and shapes the perception of readers in part 1. Again, the text is The Warmth of Other Suns. There are quite a few materials. We have the Culminating Task Checklist, the Culminating Task Progress Tracker, Anticipation Guide, the Structure Note Taking Tool, the vocabulary list, vocabulary journal, annotating and note taking reference guide, assessing sources reference guide, avoiding plagiarism reference guide, organization, questioning and style reference guides, and the framing question set. So, for the lesson overview, students will continue reading part 1 of The Warmth of Other Suns and begin tracking their ideas about Wilkerson's use of sources and structure in the text to convey her ideas and perspective about the Great Migration. They will also preview the unit's culminating task. So, let's take a look at the 7 activities in this lesson. Lesson 2 begins with students working in either pairs or groups of 3 to deepen their understanding of the text in each of the sections within pages Roman numeral 7 to page 7 of The Warmth of Other Suns, using guiding questions from the structure note taking tool. To support students, this is the first time students are using this tool in this unit, so the teacher might model the completion of the first row, which is the epigraph from Richard Wright, by performing a think aloud in which they add information in response to the questions in each column. The next epigraph, Mahalia Jackson, could be guided practice before releasing students to work in small groups to complete the other sections. As students work, the teacher should be circulating and checking on students to provide support and ensure that students understand how to use the tool and how it's used. The teacher should explain that they will discuss the thread label column at a later time, and that's the last column on the graphic organizer. For activity 2, the groups at the end of activity 1 join with another group to compare their responses on the structure note taking tool using the questions on the screen. The class has a discussion and students share any outstanding questions. To support students, the teacher should circulate, check in on groups, and listen to their discussions, prompting with questions or providing reasoning or evidence as they discuss. Keep the share short, but ensure that students are reading to continue using the tool in the next lesson, are ready to continue using the tool in the next section of part 1. In activity 3, students continue to work with their groups to deepen their understanding by tracking and evaluating the effects of details used by Wilkerson in each section of the Great Migration, 1915 to 1970, from part 1 of The Warmth of Other Suns, again, pages 8 through 15, which they read at the end of lesson 1. They use their learning log notes to respond to the questions on the screen from the structured note-taking tool. To support students, the teacher should check on students individually to provide support and ensure they understand the tool and its use. In activity 4, the class reviews the vocabulary list for part 1 of the text and locates the words as they are used in the text, referencing the provided page number and considering the questions on the screen for each term. Then they write down each word with their own notes about its meaning and importance in their vocabulary journals. To support students, based on the needs of their students, the teacher may want to model how, as a reader, they write down vocabulary in their journal. But students have used this tool since the beginning of the school year, so that may not really be necessary. In activity 5, students individually respond to the question on the screen. What is one word or phrase you would use to describe Wilkerson's structure, given what you noticed about her use of sources and organization in part 1 in a round robin quick share? To support students, the teacher might turn this activity into a Padlet. Activity 6 is all about activating students' prior knowledge. They listen and read along silently as either the teacher or one of their peers reads the central and framing questions aloud. Next, they individually review the framing questions, paying special attention to questions 1 and 5, which are the focusing questions for the first section of the unit. Then, they create another notice and wonder table in their learning logs and add their responses to the questions to track their observations. Finally, they discuss their table and ideas about what they think they'll be doing in this unit with a partner. This activity concludes with a class share. Students will return to the central question in each section of the unit to reflect on how their understanding has evolved or become more nuanced as a result of their learning. To support students, the teacher might expand this activity with an anticipation guide or activate background knowledge using the KWL protocol. To wrap up this lesson, students individually review the culminating task checklist and their notice and wonder table from the previous lesson, then jot down initial notes in response to the questions on the screen. Next, they move into small groups and determine what skills and knowledge they need to be successful on the culminating task by responding to the second set of questions. The group either creates a checklist in their learning log or uses the culminating task progress tracker to note what they need to know and be able to do to be successful on the culminating task. For each type of knowledge and skill identified, they assess how prepared they are currently. They will revisit the culminating task and continue to build their understanding of it as they move throughout the unit. To support students, the teacher might check on them individually, asking questions to probe their understanding of what is being asked of them as they work in small groups, and in the activity by having a class discussion to make sure all students have a clear understanding of the task. A class created anchor chart that includes the culminating task and student responses regarding what they need to know and do to succeed on it would be a great addition to the classroom environment. So that concludes lessons 1 and 2 for our Cubs. We have for lesson 1, students will know what happens in the 3 parts of leaving from the warmth of other suns. They'll understand how the details in each part interact to convey the impact of migration on individuals and families. And they'll be able to analyze relationships among the details in all 3 parts of leaving, pages 1 through 7, using the Attending to Details tool. For lesson 2, students will know the sources used and structure of part 1 of The Warmth of Other Suns. They'll understand Wilkerson's use of sources and structure to convey her ideas and perspective about the Great Migration. And they'll be able to evaluate Wilkerson's use of structure to achieve her purpose in part one of the book, using an exit ticket to answer the question: what is one word or phrase you would use to describe Wilkerson's structure, given what you noticed about her use of sources and organization in part one? So that's a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.